Hello everyone. I can see myself now, so that means we're started. Welcome at our new event in our series Inclusive Extensions, a series focusing on how art, design and technology can help us in reaching a more inclusive society for people with a disability. And last year, the project came about in collaboration with New Emergences, an organization that discusses diversity in digital media culture, electronic music and sound art. And together with them, we organized an event and a workshop series in which already many strong ideas and insights were raised on the position of people with a disability in society and the possibilities art and design can offer in this. And today, in this next event, we will take it a step further and we will shift from new ideas to the actual implementation of the technologies. So we will discuss this with very interesting guests who will reflect on the potential role and future of technology in an inclusive society. But first, I will introduce the moderator of the event, which is Eva Fotiadi, a historian and theorist of contemporary art and design, whose research explores the relations between art, design, and the public. And she has a PhD from the University of Amsterdam, has been a research fellow at Free University Berlin and Princeton University, and she currently teaches at the St. Joost School of Art and Design, where she also coordinates the international exchange program Speculating the Future. And last year, she was one of the curators of the exhibition of the Other Abilities Festival in Amsterdam, a festival that aimed at investigating the possibilities of creating aesthetic events that can be experienced simultaneously by people with and without physical and sensory differences. So, Eva, I'm very happy to have you here tonight as our moderator, and the digital platform floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Lara, and welcome everyone, also from my side. I'm also seeing myself right now on it. So welcome everyone. We are very happy to be here for this panel that is organized by the Inclusive Extensions platform. And we have three speakers who are going each one give a presentation of 10 minutes. And I would like to invite everyone who would like to pose questions to the speakers to send the questions either via the chat, or you can also send your questions through email to questions@impact.nl. And I'm going to pose the questions after the presenters give each one their talk. After the very end of the event, it could be possible if you want to stay in the Zoom a little bit longer. So let me introduce the first speaker of tonight, who is Michel Witter. And Michel Witter is Senior Lecturer in Interaction Design at the Academy of Communication and User Experience at the Advanced University of Applied Sciences in Breda. Michel is researcher at the Center of Expertise and for Art, Design and Technology, or CARAT, C-A-R-A-D-T. He's currently concerned with the design of sensory augmentation technologies for deaf people, and he has just started a PhD on suitably situated design methods for the design of such technologies. Michel's position is that current advanced technology is not effective enough to support people with sensory disabilities in social interaction in the wild. Therefore, he aims to develop a co-creation toolkit to support designers to realize the potential of sensory augmentation technologies. If you are interested to find more information about the research of Michel Witter, you can also check out his ResearchGate page. So, Michel, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Eva. Okay, my introduction. So, like Eva said, and hello to everybody. My name is Michel Witter. And I teach interaction design in Breda at Avans Hogeschool, Avans Polytechnic. And I have been educated in a technical computer science and digital arts and media innovation. And currently I just started as a PhD student. My research deals with situated design methods for the design of sensory augmentation technology for deaf. This design started with my interest in designing wearables and using a phenomenological approach towards designing technology that augments sense-making. Some years ago, I created the first prototype of a so-called compass belt, which is worn by the dancer on the right, and I used this device to discover to what extent it would influence the regular behavior and use it as a use case for further investigation. And here you see two dancers of dance group, dance company De Stilte. These are Marije de Almeida Castaña and Donna Scholten, and they are experimenting with a so-called inactive torch, which is on the left, that translates the distance between the hand and an external object into felt vibrations. And my first compass belt, which is worn by the dancer on the right, and that is translates the magnetic north, position of magnetic north, through vibrotactile stimuli through the belt. During a short dance exercise, it showed that the behavior of the dancers altered when they were wearing the compass belt. So for instance, one dancer, her axis along which the extent of performance was oriented shifted slightly as if there was some kind of pulling effect by the belt on the dancer's body. And the other dancer claimed to feel more confident while she was doing a pirouette, as if a partner was guiding her actually by her waist. This kicked off further exploration of the effect of sensory augmentation technology on people at an unconscious level, or preferably from a perspective of pure experience, as I would call it. That's a more phenomenological approach to the design of such devices. Those early experiments finally led to a set of design principles to support interaction designers in the development of technologies that augment sense-making. Also, together with researchers Alwin de Rooij and Michel van Dartel, and some others, I discovered that an open collaboration between artists and scientists spontaneously offers relevant themes contributing to the potential of a dialogue advancing our understanding of sensory augmentation and the applications that involve it. These themes included applications for healthcare, well-being, and social interaction. In his so-called Laboratory of Doubt, the artist Karsten Huller provides museum audience with objects from carousels and slippery slides to upside-down goggles, the ones you see here in the picture. And he did it in order to provoke experience and reflection. Most of you will probably know the upside-down goggles shown in this picture. And the one in the middle, the black and white picture, is one picture of the original Innsbruck goggle experiments conducted by Theodor Eresman and Ivo Kohler around 1950. These experiments gave insights into neuroplasticity, which is the relearning capabilities for spatial orientation and movement, and that some rules of perception change or might disappear. The goggles shown here are actually designed to be worn just once, or at least not intended for regular use. And they are not actually augmenting sensing, but, however, they may augment sense-making through a novel experience with your own world, with your known world, through a special device. Although this is quite interesting, you can imagine what social effects might arise when you wear this device during doing the groceries. Sensory augmentation technology is driven by humans, driven by human behavior and the interactions with their environment. And where it is originally meant to enhance human capabilities, the design of it and consequently its use may interfere with common social behavior. And this interference may lead to immediate awkward feelings or situations, or turn out to have significant effect in the near future. So, sensory augmentation technology influences people's behavior, mostly subtle, but sometimes quite radical. And in turn, this influences social interaction and may lead to surprising and sometimes confronting or unwanted situations. For example, the short video you see here, the loop of this video, you see this guy wearing a tactile feedback belt, which I constructed. Actually, the first prototype of this tactile feedback belt. This belt makes it possible to feel virtual objects in space through vibrotactile feedback, so vibration motors, based on the position and orientation of the participant. The occurrence of vibrations directly changes a person's regular or intended behavior. With an updated version of this so-called tactile feedback belt, I conducted an experiment at the Sand City Festival in Utrecht 2 years ago. And participants were asked to wander around in the large meeting area and try to discover certain hotspots. When during their walk among the crowd, the participants were triggered by the belt and by its vibrations, they mostly stopped walking and rotated a few times, the rotated motion a few times before continuing their examining walk. This sometimes led to situations where participants unintentionally and unconsciously entered the intimate space of bystanders. This illustrates an interesting effect of the meeting of people that know and the people that don't know, or as I'd rather say, it illustrates the effect of a spontaneous encounter of people that receive different kinds of information from the environment. However, observations in a setting like this only shows the visually perceivable changes in the physical movement and expressions, so things you can see from a distance. It is quite hard to capture minor physical changes or the mental processes and feelings that the felt sensations bring about at that certain moment in space. Using the technology in real spaces like this, instead of the design studio of research laboratories, offers complex and ad hoc situations and circumstances that cannot be predicted. Human-centeredness is principally a core concern for most interaction designers or developers of any ICT application. In my opinion, their design practices should involve the user more than just through regular testing or of advanced prototypes and trying to improve parts of their functionality. It is central that the users and stakeholders from the context participate even in the early phases of the design process. This helps having designers change the perspective and getting rid of bias and prejudice and understand the value of subjective and lived experience. Still, most technology is designed and developed in ideal conditions, in the lab, where participants are instructed by the researcher, where potentially burning external influences have been removed or filtered out. In my design research, I aim to point at relevant situated design methods that reveal true issues from real use and realistic meanings from the interaction with the technology in situ. Where my intention was to investigate opportunities for sensory augmentation to people with disabilities in general, my attention has shifted towards the design of assistive technology that fits more general purposes in communication between deaf and non-deaf people. This image you see here shows the so-called VEST, which is an acronym for the Versatile Extrasensory Transducer. This is developed by David Eagleman and Scott Novich. And the VEST translates words into patterns that can be felt on the skin. After a short period of training, the subject is able to recognize patterns related to symbolic representations such as words and numbers. The device may support lip reading and sign language, but it is designed from a hearer's perspective. It is designed to cater the hearing. I actually assume that communication is a dialogue, is a two-way conversation where technology has to deal with both parties, so the deaf and the non-deaf persons. In my opinion, in general, technology could help propel inclusiveness, and particularly sensory augmentation might or may even offer ways to help understand others and may perceive the world differently, since they offer the new sensory experiences. In the end of my research, I hope to support designers by offering insights into suitable design methods, possibly supplemented by guidelines, and I play with the thought of creating a modular toolkit for co-creating sensory augmentation experiences. This is my introduction. Thank you for your attention, and I'll hand over the presentation back to Eva and Simon.
Yeah, thank you very much, Michel, for the first presentation. This was really very interesting. I have, before we move on to Simon, I have a quick question for you. And it is very much triggered by the topic of this panel, which is from design to practice. And my question is actually, situated design means that the designer works together with parties which are important in the context of the design project. And you have mentioned people with impairments, for example, deaf people. In your work, do you try to involve also other parties, like industry parties or other parties that might facilitate the move from design to practice, or not yet during the PhD? And what would be your ideal situation?
Yeah, good question. Where I'm mainly focused now on trying to get a grip on the issues dealt, or maybe the circumstances of the target group. Actually, I do have to deal with the technology, and technology is quite diverse. I created some tools together with some people, which I did these experiments, and let's say 2 years ago, I hope to provide a platform, a modular platform that I can change quickly to meet other circumstances, and maybe offer new kinds of triggers than just vibrations by the motors. However, the technology is quite hard to manipulate, and actually try to change in such a way it can be used by others quickly enough. So I need different partners that can offer tools that hopefully can work together to create some modular toolkits, or at least a different, or let's say a multiple set of tools to experiment with, and which are accessible enough to learn quickly and then do the regular things.
Yeah, thank you very much. Let me move on to Simon Doher and introduce Simon, who is our next speaker. Simon traveled a large part of his life through the world by bike. This gave him an understanding of people, which contributed to a human-centered approach further in his life and his work. While he was studying design, he lost his eyesight, and that was in 2009. He returned 5 years later, and he graduated from the Design Academy in Eindhoven in 2017, and now he works as a social designer who analyzes people's wishes and needs without having a preconceived idea of the outcome. Unimpeded by the limitations of aesthetics, Simon's human-centered approach has resulted in innovative concepts and products that bridge communication gaps. He has designed applications such as the emotion whisperer, which reads, in citation marks, emotions of a person during a conversation, a discussion, so somebody who is in front of you, for instance, or the tic-tic indoor navigation that helps you find your way in a large public building, even if you cannot see. Such applications add the touch and sound as equal alternatives to vision so that nobody gets shut out. Simon, thank you very much for being with us, and the floor is yours.
Yes, well, very welcome to you all. Good evening. This was an splendid introduction by Eva. I'm actually quite happy that I wrote it myself. So anyway, you might have heard that I'm a designer. I develop products and spaces that stimulate equality, connection, and innovation. And well, you might also have heard that I am somehow in a unique position, being blind. Actually, being blind gives me the possibility to be my own user expert. And with the accompanied design tools where I was educated in, I have the ability to uh, choose a direction and organize the path, the process, the development process towards the end goal in a logic and efficient manner. And for cooperating with other parties such as universities or technical partners, this is an essential key. In my point of view, the essential key in this is communication, being able to talk in the same language. I think that the responsibility of a designer concerning to inclusion and diversity is actually to be a moderator or a transmission factor in order to create a connection between all these different parties, universities, scientists, technical partners, but also the target group. And I think the ability of designers, and I think designers should realize their quality as well their limitations, but the quality of designers means that they're able to make that information accessible to everybody. So it's a transmission between all of these factors. The previous talker, Michel Witter, he talked about this very interesting theme, but I would see it a possibility that a designer is involved to make his knowledge accessible to everybody. Now, my way of working as a designer is two sides process. There is a practical side in technology and innovation, but there's also theoretical side. And I think the theoretical side is very interesting, but also a fundamental part of the role of a designer, because it enables you to understand with which parties you're dealing with. Recently, I had an assignment with the Ministry of Health, Welfare and Sports, and I heard that woman of that ministry say that she didn't believe in rules. And I thought, okay, that is particular, because 40 years ago, in the Dutch society, by the way, we were at the same position. And we also said, we don't believe in rules, we don't believe in government policy. We expect the people and to be aware of the situation and have their own awareness that the society should change. Basically, they should start to think by themselves that it is important, for instance, to make stores accessible. That didn't work. So to be able to understand the power dynamics and the organization structures, but also the way of thinking of, for instance, government and the Ministry of Health in this case, makes you aware that it is very important to implement technology and innovation and leading to inclusive rules, that, for instance, government policy should create laws. Because the effect of laws, let's take a law, that could mean that there should be a certain amount of public toilets in a certain area. Well, the effect of such a law is that, first of all, practically, there are just enough public toilets, so you can go there. Mainly important for people in a wheelchair, also people with, I don't know the English word, but stoma. But the other effect is that there will develop a inclusive culture, because people, generally all people in the Dutch society, they get accustomed to these rules, and that shifts a social awareness. And social awareness is a very important key in reaching inclusion and diversity in society. The effect of that social awareness is that it is actually saying or telling what the value is that is given to the inhabitants of a society. And that value is also influences, for instance, the way that care insurance companies deal with their insurance policy. Anyway, what they offer to their clients. And I lift out one of my projects, which is the Emotion Whisper, which is a tool that is able to translate the body language of conversation partners into a vibration. And I developed this in cooperation with the University of Amsterdam, and also with the University of Eindhoven, and with several technical partners. And the lack of being able to see body language has a large influence on social interaction and social participation for the visually impaired. This is actually validated. But the Emotion Whisper is not only an app, but it also comes with a pair of glasses, and it comes with a wearable. So that means that being able to making this product accessible, you need to also think about buying this stuff. And there is some financial value involved. But for instance, a care insurance company can make the product more accessible by taking it into their guidelines, and that they're able to provide such a tool for their clients. The Emotion Whisper is far from this. It's still a research project, but it is an interesting thought to think about. And so, what I said, an inclusive culture can be reached by laws, and it shifts the social awareness of the people in a society. And one of the effects is also that it's, well, theoretically enlarges the chance the chance that, for instance, a care insurance company can provide these tools. I think technology and innovation is in itself a process wherein the development is a result of, let's say, business models of the tech companies. I'm quite certain that our next speaker will tell you a lot of things about that. And for so, I will stop talking, and I'm looking forward to speak to you in the after talk. Bye.
Simon, thank you very much for the short presentation, and indeed for connecting actually the designer, the user, and the government, and what is important to be done. I would like to ask you, as you actually answered already my first question, I would briefly like to ask you, since you have both positions, the position of somebody who is visually impaired, as well as the position of the designer, and you have experience of both worlds, does actually the world of designers see the people with visual or other impairments not only as users, but potentially also as innovators, which would actually create a kind of position of partnership?
Well, just to be short, just a couple of statements. The Dutch society is exclusive. We try to make it inclusive, but it is extremely exclusive. But this is an example of that shifting. And to my opinion, we're just at the start of that shifting. That means that if the Dutch society is inclusive, that the designer field is exclusive as well. There's profile, white, highly educated, non-colored. That's a profile. And to my opinion, to answer your question, is at this point the design field is shifting as well, because it's shifting towards social design. At this point, I think it's also in the beginning. I see still designers using a lot of target groups as an input, and I think, well, I won the Dutch Design Awards this year, and in the commission text was written, I make them aware of their own limitations. And so, just this is a very long answer to come to one to your question, and that is no. I am not included in the design process at all. I have the idea that none of disabled people are actually included in the design process. And just to go a little bit further, I think that is also a result of the society not being inclusive enough.
Clear point. Thank you. And definitely also a point for Michel and his research. Thank you very much. I would briefly like to mention for those who might have joined us later that you can send your questions either via the chat or by email. You can email questions at impact.nl. And with this, I would like to quickly introduce the third speaker we have with us tonight, and to welcome Gesche Joost, who is a professor for design research at the Berlin University of the Arts, and since 2005, she is also heading the Design Research Lab. With international partners, she is conducting research and development projects in human-computer interaction, in wearable computing, as well as in user-centered design and participation. Until 2010, she was junior professor for interaction design and media at TU Berlin in cooperation with Telecom Innovation Laboratories. She has also co-founded the non-for-profit company Calliope, which engages in digital education for school children in Germany. And among various distinctions, I will only mention here the 2009 Young Talent Award for Science from the Mayor of Berlin. From 2014 to 2018, Gesche Joost was appointed Digital Champion for the EU Commission, and since 2015, she is member of the Supervisory Board of SAP, and further she acts in various national committees and boards. There are simply way too many to mention. Gesche, thank you very much for being with us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Eva. It's great to be with you. And it was the greatest handover we could have, Simon. Thanks for pointing out this gap that people with different abilities or people with disabilities don't play a role in design processes. That's actually where we started, and this is where I also want to start my little presentation, so like just some minutes. So we started in the Design Research Lab, which is a group of nice people, of designers and researchers and tech nerds. And we started some years ago asking exactly this question. So how can we understand the everyday life challenges of people with impaired hearing or vision? And that was one of the approaches of one of my PhD students, Tom Beeling. And we ask ourselves, so what's the process on the one hand side, and what's also this dimension of experiences that we just don't know as designers, and how can we get in contact? And Tom, at that point in time, he just started engaging with a community of deaf people. He tried to learn some parts of sign language, and he then slowly understood also that it's not just an impairment, let's say, but it's a totally different world of communication of the sign language with the deaf people. And at some point in time, we met with different communities of deaf people, and then we felt excluded because they were doing the conversation with sign language, and we just didn't get the point. And they really had fun and enjoyed themselves, and we were like, oh, okay, so now we understand that we are out of the game. And that was a kind of turning point also when we looked at our research methods. We always did human-centered design and all these kind of approaches, but then we went very much into participatory design, and that was the first point also of kicking off this process, where we were saying, how can we design digital technologies differently and take visually impaired people or deaf people and blind people as innovators for new thinking about technologies. And that's where this idea was born. We took a community of deaf blind people, so people who cannot see and cannot hear, and ask ourselves, so if they are our benchmark, if they are our innovators and challengers, if we can get them participate in the digital age, in internet communication, then we might have gotten a good step ahead. And so we didn't know how deafblind people communicate, and they have this specific hand-touch alphabet that's called LORM, and there's a very particular kind of sign language attached to the hand. And we took this LORM language, and you will see how it works in a minute, and kind of just translated it into a glove. It was just, a kind of standard glove that we took, and we put pressure-sensitive fabrics or pressure sensors on the inner side of the hand onto this glove to detect this kind of hand-touch alphabet. And on the outer side, we just put like little vibration motors to translate the communication. And we did a little kind of mobile phone video on that one, and I will show you this little video too.
People who are deafblind do not have many people to talk to. Communication with the outside world is difficult and is often hardly possible. A common way of communication used by deafblind people is the tactile hand-touch alphabet called LORM, in which characters are assigned to a certain area of the hand. Therefore, conversation partners have to be familiar with LORM, and physical contact is necessary. These preconditions often lead to social isolation of the deafblind and to a dependence on people relaying information around them. At the Design Research Lab in Berlin, we are developing the mobile LORM glove, a communication device which translates the German LORM alphabet into digital text and vice versa. Pressure-sensitive fabric enables the deafblind user to compose text messages that are transmitted to the receiver's phone or computer. Small vibrating motors located on the back of the glove allow the wearer to perceive incoming messages via vibrotactile feedback. A Bluetooth module manages the data transmission between the glove and the smartphone of the user. When communicating with a deafblind person, touching the other's hand is no longer the only way to do so. Messages can be sent over distance to other LORM gloves or to mobile phones. Messages can also be sent from mobile phones to gloves. This enables people to talk to more than one person at the same time. The mobile LORM glove empowers deafblind people to engage with a broader spectrum of people and gain access to a broader range of information, thus enhancing their independence.
Okay, so this was this little video, and it was a highly participatory process, of course, and the innovation came from the deafblind community. So it was not us as designers creating some fancy gadgets, but it was on the opposite side. So we tried to just understand their their experiences and their ideas, and we were more the kind of translators of their innovative ideas into a piece of technology with a kind of so user experience. So kind of creating together a prototype. And we were really literally sitting together at a table and then trying to get this touch, this feeling for this communication device. So that was kind of really shifting the roles and having the deafblind community as our innovators, as our guideline. And this leads to rethinking what technology can do for accessibility of the internet. And you see here a screenshot of the first Twitter account. So that was a communication device, so an extension of that one, because there were many also deafblind communities who used this prototype of the LARM hand and of the mobile LARM glove in order to get their voice heard. So they used it to connect to Twitter, and then they were starting tweeting about their social isolation, and that there is no kind of device helping them currently. So there's no device on the market helping them to get online. And so we kind of created this process and this situation where these experiences could be translated and could be heard. And we learned so much in this process. So this was really inspiring. And for our understanding also of inclusive design, I brought some questions also maybe for the panel discussion. So how could we come to designing a more inclusive society? So of course, first of all, we have to foster a well-educated digital society, understanding this vision of digital inclusion, to what this means, because I rarely see any kind of dialogue about this topic in Germany and Europe so far. So there are really just a few events where we talk about digital inclusion and or what this could mean and the potential about it. Then we should come through these processes, as we learned also from Michel and from Simon. So what is this participatory design process to include very diverse people and include people with disabilities in the development process? And then only if we do so, we can reflect on the diversity of our society in the development process. If we really, get them on board, get them to sit on the table, and get them to have a say in the decisions that need to be made. We have to understand people with disabilities as experts and innovation drivers. So, because when we developed this mobile LARM glove, we understood much more, not only about deafblind people and deafblind communication possibilities, but also tactile communication as such. So it opens up a new dimension of how we can interact with touch through also the internet. So this opens up for many more kind of scenarios and use cases. So we came up to many more solutions by learning from their innovation capacities. We have, of course, to support open and inclusive access to tools and technologies. And I'm a strong believer in open source, in open access, and everything kind of opening up the access to technologies through the internet. But we have to ask ourselves, for whom is it really open? So if we have this whole debate also about Fab Labs and the maker culture, this is usually only open for, white men, between 25 and 35. So it is not inclusive, but it excludes so many people, and even more people with disabilities. So understand this accessibility in a much broader sense, and also understand social barriers when we talk about accessibility to the digital society as such. And then, of course, we have to, as Simon also pointed out, it's the topic of digital inclusion on policy level. So what are KPIs? So being very pragmatic in this approach. So what do we want to reach? What is the funding behind it? What are the processes of putting digital inclusion into place? Because there's not much legislation around so far. And the topic is not very much on the political agenda, because still, I think on the European level, we still try to understand what's happening in this digital transformation at all. So thinking about inclusion is not very advanced yet. And we have to fix this whole issue and tackle the whole problem of digital inequality on a broader level. And I think that if we tackle the problem of digital inequality, so the rising gap between different people, and more people are feeling left behind. 1 minute. More and more people are feeling left behind. We could take, again, this participatory design approach, take people with disabilities as our challengers, as our innovators, and design, an inclusive digital society for them and with them, and then opening up for other, diverse people with diverse backgrounds. This would be, a very good way forward, in my opinion. That is it from my side. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Gesche. And it's actually quite nice to see also an example where what is still, in many cases, still a wish to actually have a good communication, productive, and in its way actually equal between the designers and the future users, is actually a project where this has worked quite well. I'm wondering, when it comes to making such a product accessible to users a little bit more broadly, which would mean finding ways to finance it, to subsidize it, to potentially promote laws. Have you already for instance, in this example of the glove, or in another example, already made some steps or have some plans for how to design making these products desirable for people to subsidize them?
Do a lot together with industry partners. So, for example, with Otto Box, they are doing a prothesis and orthesis, for example. For this particular mobile lawn glove, it was really hard to find somebody who really wants to do it as a product, because the so-called target group is so small. And that's really an issue, because there's so few deafblind people, which is good in a way, but it's bad on the other hand side, because then you don't find anybody who sees them as a market. So we were just putting it as an open source a piece of technology, so that everybody could kind of, let's say, print their own version of it. But that's not a real solution, because, if you want to design this on an open source basis, it has so many prerequisites. You have to be really, tech savvy. You have to have the access to this, to the tools to make it, and so on. So we need to have it more on a policy level. And we have it, for example, in Germany with more inclusion on elementary and at other school levels. So we have inclusion programs in schools, and that's triggering, again, the production of technologies and supportive materials and tools to help children in school to follow the teaching. And that's the way how it goes. So we have to put it through policies and then push the technology development. So the market will not solve it, and open source will also not solve it alone.
Yeah, indeed, you seem to really agree with Simon in this point, that you have to force it in, whether it is by law, but in any case with with political decision making. Yeah. Thank you. I would like actually now to open to questions for everyone. And I would actually like to pose a first question, and any of you could actually answer it. Simon, as somebody who graduated a few years ago, and both Gesche and Michel, as people very much since many, many years involved in design education, not only in research, but also in design education at bachelor and master's level. When we say that there should be awareness, do you see any moves within the academies, within the education of the designers, to actually emphasize the importance of situated design with these users in particular, or also issues of accessibility and diversity really having a prominent position within the early education of designers, bachelor and masters? Do you have examples? Is it something that you believe is missing? Absolutely, yes.
Well, generally, I did not do that much investigation in the academies yet, but I know that I'm connected and doing research for a center of expertise, which is concentrating and focusing on situated design and situated design methods. And so that's part of an answer to your question. Only there's this specific spot I could link to and develop doing my own research and design. But I generally think that a lot of schools still have a long way to go to have inclusiveness in their curriculum or as part as taking people in for the personnel and students, of course. I think there's still a long way to go, and maybe, and I'd like to link to what Simon was saying, is that designers can play a role in that, and maybe as a moderator, as Simon calls it, try to have people understand the necessity for it, and maybe come across conditions where they understand who is being left out and what opportunities you miss if you do not think about inclusiveness in general.
If I may also answer that question.
Yes, please.
Yes. So I agree with Michel. Just from my point of view, from my working or my design practice, so I'm a designer. I tend to look broader than that because I think inclusion, for instance, in the design field or for the disabled, I tend to look way broader than that because inclusion is integrated into society. And I think it takes an extreme amount, several generations, in order to raise that up. But I think it is integrated in, where we talked about government policy, but also education, schools. It is in the labor market, just about everything. And I think, and that's where I want to reflect on. Making inclusion through design. Design is also a very exclusive field. So I agree that design is able to perhaps moderate or act as a transmission, and that you can also have a design input through the user expert, as Gesche told. But you have to realize the design field in itself is very limited, and it's limited to white male, high educated. So I think there is still a very extremely long way to go, as well as in the design academies. Still, the design academy is also based upon organization. So organization structures are still limited in their diversity.
Thank you. I'm looking also at the questions that have come in, and I have a question from Mariette that came through the chat, and it is a question for Gesche. The question is, do you think that deaf people would prefer the long glove over sign language at some point? I guess that the question of Mariette is that they would potentially also, not only deaf blind, but also people who are only deaf might actually want to use it.
It might be supportive or complementary, I guess, because sign language, as far as I have learned it, is very sophisticated. So if you see how deaf people use sign language, it's just amazing. So it's so fast and it's so convincing how they have their own kind of space. And I think that this kind of touch alphabet could be used in other contexts. So maybe also with deaf people, but also for hearing people in noisy environments. So having this kind of sensitive glove for kind of shortcut communication on a construction site, for example, or anything. So I think we could learn from this sign language and transfer to different contexts, not only for deaf people, but also when it's hard to hear in any kind of situation.
Yeah, thank you. Indeed, actually. Yeah, just also because actually being hard of hearing is not only an issue of how well you hear, but also how you can locate sound in space. And that can actually help, because some people actually cannot always locate the sound or hear the sound from whichever side it comes. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
that's
I
what we also
interrupt.
did. We did an app for that one also, because to recognize where is a source of sound is coming from is easily handleable through a mobile device. So we just had a kind of little compass thing, or a little kind of pointer towards the direction of where the sound is coming from. So that was also an issue in this whole project.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Thank you. I haven't. Michel wanted to add something, I believe.
Well,
Still
adding to the idea of using this interesting long glove, maybe even transfer that to use by others, for instance, people that are just deaf. I must say that from some talks I had with deaf people, I understood that indeed this sign language is very sophisticated and quite rich, and there have been several occasions of people designing sign language glove, and that well, there's some critique from quite a lot of deaf people that say that it does not fulfill the rich communication that they have with using sign language. And even someone said that she, in this case, even developed, being continually deaf, actually, a sense of approaching objects from behind, so feeling someone or something is nearing. And I think we can learn from these sensitivities that I personally do not have. And it's very hard for me to understand that. And there's the point that I hope technology will help to understand both worlds.
No, interesting.
Thank you. We have just a little bit of time more, so I would like to ask Simon if he would like to add something to this discussion.
Yeah, I think well, I think you're both the speakers are dealing with which I call haptic information, and it's a field that is integrated in both of my projects. So as well, the Emotion Whisperer, I use a wearable to execute the recognized body language, and so you can feel a specific pattern on the skin. And yeah, I think it's very interesting, but because I think it's also from a designer point of view, I think it is somehow a new field you can engage in. What kind of information can you transfer through the skin? And just to add some personal saying on it, I had when so I have to laugh about it myself, but I had this. I sometimes have these crazy ideas, right? So at a certain point, I had the idea of being a news presenter. But I thought to myself, how am I going to do that? Because I'm not able to read the information on screen. So I have to find a way to remember the text. So, and I was looking into the possibility of transferring information by symbols, some almost Japanese like tactile symbols, so that I can become a news presenter. Now it's silent for a long
Sounds
time.
beautiful. Very nice.
Very
Beautiful
interesting.
idea. Very poetic.
But you can. I see possibilities in both of your Michel with the vest and Gesche with the long sleeve. I'm going to focus upon that once again.
Thank you. Great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. As it often happens, we don't really have enough time at the point when the discussion is so interesting. We have actually reached the limits of our time, and we have even exceeded it a little bit. So I would very much like to thank everyone for your presentations, for the participation in the discussion. I would like to thank the audience for the questions that you have sent, and we have not had enough time to pose many of them. And I would also like to once again thank Lara. And with this, close this event. And if somebody would actually be interested, you can still contact us. Stay a little bit around. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It was my pleasure.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.